People drag themselves through life with exhausted bodies and fearful, obedient minds. The sparkle fades from their eyes, voices become rough and monotone, and even their hair, nails, and shoes wear out. Endless hours in front of a computer screen bring that nagging pain behind the eyes. Legs feel like jelly after standing for hours behind a cash register, and the skin turns pale and gray under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights. The 9-to-5 routine doesn't just drain energy, it gradually erodes a person's spirit and humanity. Why do we accept this way of life, which seems more like a sentence than a choice? These were the same questions posed by writer Charles Bukowski, who expressed his perspective on work and creativity in a letter to his friend John Martin. Bukowski, known for his raw and unapologetic style, was a poet and storyteller who never shied away from the ugly truths of life. Born in Germany and raised in Los Angeles since 1923, his childhood was marked by physical and emotional abuse from his father starting at age 6. School offered no refuge. Being a German immigrant, he was often bullied. To make matters worse, during adolescence, he suffered from severe acne that left both visible and invisible scars, deepening his sense of isolation. After high school, Bukowski dreamed of becoming a writer and moved to New York to pursue that goal. Reality, however, proved harsher than expected. Financial struggles forced him to abandon his dream, at least temporarily, and return to Los Angeles. There, he landed a job at the post office, which allowed him to get by but, in his words, drained his soul. For nearly a decade, he endured the monotony of a job he despised, feeling his life slip through his fingers. Yet that same contempt for routine fueled his relentless pursuit of writing. A pivotal turning point came when Bukowski quit that despised job and devoted himself to writing Post Office, an autobiographical novel chronicling those grueling years. Published at the age of 51, the book not only brought him recognition but also launched his literary career, cementing him as a significant figure in American literature. Through his words, Bukowski exposed the invisible scars left by soul-crushing jobs, resonating with countless people trapped in lives they never truly chose. In later interviews, he admitted, ironically, that his father, despite the violence, was his greatest literary teacher. "He taught me the meaning of pain," Bukowski said. "When you're treated like garbage long enough, you end up saying what you really mean." That philosophy, confronting reality without sugarcoating it, stayed with him his entire life. At 20, after dropping out of college, he made his first serious attempt at becoming a professional writer. He roamed across the United States, taking odd jobs while writing hundreds of short stories. Most were rejected, the few that got published barely made a ripple. Disillusioned, he stopped writing for nearly a decade. But in 1955, at age 35, he faced death from a bleeding ulcer. Surviving that brush with mortality shook him to his core. As if fate had intervened, he picked up his pen once more, writing with renewed ferocity. Despite his perseverance, recognition eluded him. Forced by financial necessity, he returned to the post office, confronting the very drudgery he had tried to escape. Yet this time, he vowed not to let go of his writing. Before every shift, he carved out time to write, maintaining that grueling pace for years. Although he managed to get a few stories published in small magazines, success remained distant. Still, Bukowski refused to give up. His daily grind was one of quiet rebellion, fighting against the mediocrity life seemed to offer. Then, at 50, an age when most people resign themselves to routine, fortune knocked on his door. His work began gaining attention, and with it came an opportunity that would change everything. John Martin offered him a deal to quit the post office and write full-time. Bukowski put it bluntly, "I had two choices, stay at the post office and go insane, or quit and starve. I chose to starve." Within a month of quitting, he completed his first novel, marking the start of a prolific writing career that would endure until his final days. Charles Bukowski's story is, in many ways, an anomaly. Most people stuck in jobs they despise never find such a dramatic escape. Waking up early, grinding through long workdays, and coming home exhausted is the reality for millions. But how did we come to accept this as normal? When did it become standard to spend most of our lives in jobs that drain us physically, mentally, and emotionally? To understand this, we need to take a step back in history. The 8-hour workday, which now feels endless for many, was once a revolutionary improvement. During the Industrial Revolution, spanning the late 18th and mid-19th centuries, workers often toiled for 10 to 16 hours a day, regardless of age. Men, women, and even children labored in hazardous, poorly ventilated factories. Accidents were frequent, illnesses rampant, and the bosses? They reaped the profits without a second thought. Unsurprisingly, workers began to fight back. By 1817, a new idea took hold: split the day into 3 equal parts, 8 hours for work, 8 for rest, and 8 for leisure. What seems obvious now was then a radical concept, and while the battle was long, it eventually redefined labor standards in many countries. Yet, even with the 8-hour day in place, the exploitation didn't vanish, it simply adapted. Those supposed 8 hours of leisure quickly get swallowed up by the demands of modern life: cooking, commuting, laundry, child care, errands. By the time you sit down at night, how much energy is really left? Many find themselves collapsing onto the couch, mindlessly scrolling through social media or zoning out in front of the TV. Hobbies get pushed aside. Books gather dust. Passion projects remain just that, dreams. Modern self-help movements promise to fix this through optimization and productivity hacks. But if you look closer, many of these solutions aren't about liberating you, they're about making you a better cog in the machine. Gia Tolentino, in her essay Always Be Optimizing, argues that contemporary culture pressures us to constantly improve ourselves, not for our well-being but for efficiency's sake. Everything from fitness trends to dietary habits is marketed as a way to become more productive. But what good is being efficient if you're stuck in a system designed to exploit that efficiency? Are we working for ourselves, or just working harder for others? Spending most of your life preparing for or recovering from a job you loathe is a slow form of self-destruction. And sometimes, that simmering frustration boils over. In the United States during the 1980s and 1990s, several tragic workplace shootings occurred, largely committed by middle-aged men facing economic pressures and a sense of obsolescence. While these acts were extreme and inexcusable, they highlighted a broader truth: there's an underlying anger and despair bred by systems that treat people like disposable parts. Most of us don't lash out in violence, but the internal toll is undeniable. Feeling trapped leads to burnout, anxiety, and depression. Yet, walking away isn't always an option. Rent, bills, food, these needs don't pause just because your soul is tired. This is what Bukowski meant when he compared modern work to slavery. Unless you're born into wealth or choose to live with monastic detachment from society, work is inescapable. What's worse is the nature of that work. Repetitive, isolating jobs, like warehouse packing or factory assembly, don't just tire the body. They numb the mind. Day after day, hour after hour, your hands perform tasks while your thoughts fade into a dull haze. Bukowski escaped that cycle through writing, but not everyone is that lucky. His letter to John Martin wasn't just a reflection on work, it was a victory lap. He beat the system that tried to consume him. But what about the rest of us? If quitting isn't possible, how do we reclaim some semblance of meaning? Some companies are beginning to recognize the toll. In New Zealand, for instance, several firms experimented with a 4-day workweek without slashing pay. The results? Happier workers and steady productivity. This raises a critical question: if we can achieve the same results in less time, why cling to outdated schedules? The answer is uncomfortable: control. An exhausted population is a compliant one. When you're too tired to think, you're less likely to question. Less likely to rebel. That's why reclaiming personal time is so vital. And I'm not talking about productive, free time spent on side hustles or self-improvement courses. Real leisure means doing things with no goal beyond enjoyment, taking a walk, lying in the grass, watching clouds drift by. It's in these simple acts that we rediscover what it means to be human. Life isn't just about clocking in and out, paying bills, and waiting for weekends to pass. It's about connection, to ourselves, to others, to the world beyond deadlines. Bukowski, with all his cynicism, understood that. His greatest joy wasn't in fame or money, it was in those quiet, unstructured moments, sipping a drink in a dingy bar, scribbling words late at night, staring out a window. He wasn't offering a solution for everyone, but his life posed a daring question: what if you stopped playing along? Sometimes, rebellion starts small. Snoozing the alarm. Turning off your phone for an hour. Saying no to things that drain you. None of these acts will overthrow capitalism, but they might save your sanity. In his later years, Charles Bukowski looked back on his life with a strange mix of cynicism and gratitude. Not having wasted my life completely seems like a worthy achievement, even if only for myself, he wrote. He never sought to be a hero or a role model. In fact, he despised the idea of being idolized. What mattered to him was honesty, writing raw, unfiltered words that cut through pretense. That brutal sincerity is precisely what connected him to millions. His story wasn't about a man with extraordinary talent or luck. It was about someone who refused to accept a suffocating existence. He would often recall stories from his factory days, like the time a coworker muttered under his breath, "I'll never be free." A passing supervisor overheard and burst out laughing, relishing the worker's despair. Bukowski never forgot that moment. Slavery was never abolished, he wrote, it was only extended to include all the colors. Harsh words, but they strike at an uncomfortable truth: modern labor may not have chains, but the shackles remain, disguised as bills, debts, and the constant threat of unemployment. So, what do we do with this awareness? Should we resign ourselves to it? Or, like Bukowski, do we dare to push back, even in small ways? Most people can't just quit their jobs to chase a passion. Rent won't pay itself, and food isn't free. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the real rebellion lies in rejecting the narrative that our worth is measured by productivity, that being busy equals being valuable. Life isn't supposed to be a series of Mondays to endure, weekends to recover from, and years that blur together. There's more, there has to be more. Reclaiming that more isn't always dramatic. Sometimes, it's choosing to linger over your morning coffee instead of rushing. It's reading a book for pleasure, not for self-improvement. It's letting yourself be idle, gazing at the sky, feeling the warmth of the sun, remembering what it's like to just be. In a culture that glorifies hustle, doing nothing is radical. Those moments of stillness are where you reconnect with yourself, your dreams, your desires, the parts of you buried under deadlines and obligations. Of course, the system isn't designed to encourage this. We're constantly bombarded with messages urging us to do more, be more, earn more. Take fewer breaks. Work overtime. Rise and grind. But what if happiness isn't on the other side of another promotion? What if it's right here, hidden in the quiet spaces between obligations? Bukowski didn't find joy in corporate ladders or pay raises. He found it in writing a poem at midnight, drinking with strangers who told him their stories, walking through the city with no destination in mind. His lesson wasn't to abandon all responsibility, it was to refuse a life devoid of meaning. That's what makes the 9-to-5 trap so insidious. It doesn't just steal hours, it convinces you those hours weren't yours to begin with. It makes you believe rest is a luxury, that dreaming is childish, that slowing down is laziness. Bukowski's defiance was simple but powerful: live on your own terms. Even if that means earning less. Even if people call you foolish. Because, at the end of the day, what's more foolish, living for a paycheck or living for yourself? He put it best when he told John Martin, "I had two choices, stay in the post office and go insane, or quit and starve. I chose to starve." And in that starvation, in that risk, he found freedom. Not because it was easy, but because it was real. He faced the uncertainty and embraced it, trusting that a life lived honestly, even if messily, was better than one lived safely and regretfully. So, ask yourself, whose life are you living? Are you filling your days with obligations that drain you? Or are you carving out space, however small, to breathe, to feel, to remember what it means to be alive? Because, as Bukowski reminded us, we are here to laugh at the odds and live our lives so well that death will tremble to take us. Maybe you can't quit tomorrow. Maybe you'll never have a grand escape. But you can reclaim a piece of yourself today. Turn off the screen. Step outside. Listen to the wind. Laugh at something silly. Write a bad poem. Make a cup of tea and sit in silence. It's in these simple acts that we resist. Not with anger, but with joy. Because living isn't just surviving. It's noticing. Feeling. Being. And that's something no job can take away.